Chinese people have a saying, when people get cancer, they die. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And that's the difference between East and West. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film, The Farewell.
Ooh, I'm glad we got to pick up on this one. I'm really glad we got to actually get to this. It was touch and go for a minute.
It was touch and or go.
So I'm not sure on the release schedule where this is going to come out. This film is playing in a limited release right now, but hopefully by the time this episode drops, it's gone a little bit wider, which means you've had a chance to see it.
Yes.
Which I would be very excited to hear, because it's one of those. It's a movie that got a lot of praise at Sundance.
Yep.
From director Lulu Wang, and it's based on a podcast.
Yeah, 2016.
Yeah, a podcast episode that she wrote. So I'm very curious. I guess we could talk a little bit.
Was that This American Life?
Yeah, This American Life.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to talk about that transition from podcasting to movies.
How'd you do it?
Yeah, you took the words, you rewrote them, you rearranged them, and you filmed a bunch of scenes.
We know how you did it. You were very, very talented.
Yeah, well, which is more than I can say for us.
Well, yeah, we're not talking about us.
Oh, except I am, because we got a review on iTunes this week. And I want to read it out because somebody thinks we're cool, and I want to just celebrate, you know?
Thank you, person who thinks we're cool. We seek your validation continuously.
ED549 says, who gives us 5 stars on the iTunes. It's always a pleasure to tune in and listen about movies I might have not otherwise get to watch and get a different perspective on movies that I have. It's always a delight to my week, and to be able to expand my opinion on a movie with perspectives that are shared.
Oh, that's very nice. I feel a little guilty with us reading our reviews on the.
I feel no guilt whatsoever. I'm slathering myself up in the butter of the internet and
fair,
walking around
that's weird.
glistening.
That's weird. To be fair,
in the glow of the love that people are sharing onto my body.
Okay. I was going to say, in fairness, when we do get the occasional negative, we do talk about it.
Oh yeah, and then I get all angry and I rip my shirt off Hulk style and like rage against the internet.
So right now you're ripping your shirt off sexy. It's just you'd rage.
Pretty much, I've always got my shirt off, and in both scenarios, it's not good.
All right, well, it is what it is. But thank you very much for that review. If you'd like to leave one yourself, 1 or 5 stars, there's no in between. No, I'm kidding. Do whatever you like. We just like the 5. You can do that on iTunes. That would be greatly appreciated. We also have some emails, Shahir.
Ooh, okay, what do we got?
Okay, this is from Steven. He says, "Hi guys. Ever since your Gift of Movies episode, I've been thinking what would be something that both of you might not have seen, but you would find interesting. I saw a YouTuber making the case for Lady Hawk from 1985 being the best movie you never saw. With the passing of Rutger Hauer, however, I thought it might be appropriate to mention it and see if it was something you had seen and if it would be a good, quote, gift with aspects that I think you both would appreciate. Thanks so much."
I have seen Lady Hawk. So Lady
I
Hawk,
have not.
You've never seen Lady Hawk?
No.
Oh, Michelle Pfeiffer, not Ferris Bueller, Matthew Broderick, and Rutger Hauer.
So, Stephen, now you see my pain. If for those of you who are not familiar with the episode that Stephen is referencing, Shahir had this idea for our birthdays to do a thing about the gift of movies and to show films that we thought the other person hadn't seen and give them to them and then we review them, etc.
And it's a shitty task, I say.
I was stressed to all hell because, spoiler alert, Shahir's seen more movies than me. And I know that's insane because I've seen a lot of movies. So sadly, it does not meet the criteria, Stephen. I will check it out, though.
You should. So I saw Lady Hawk. It used to play on TV a lot in New Zealand. And I would have it, because I would tape movies off VHS, onto a VHS tape and then have a collection. And Lady Hawk sat right in between my collection. It was with these 3 other movies. It was with Conan the Barbarian, Krull, and Willow.
Is Krull the Kevin Sorbo one?
No. It's an earlier. I think Krull, the Kevin Sorbo one, might have been a remake of this original one.
Okay.
Krull was very much like Conan light.
So was the Kevin Sorbo.
And these were kind of like 80s movies that were sort of medieval in nature and kind of had like a little bit of a heavy metal aesthetic, like sort of everything was shiny and heavy metal and ripped, and I don't know. There was something cool about it. Lady Hawk is Lady Hawk's an interesting one. I don't remember a lot about the movie other than the premise, which is that there is a man who two lovers, one who is a wolf during the day and a woman who's a hawk during the night.
I like it.
Or something like that. So they can never be together or something like that. And
Oh, that's
cursed.
sad. I don't like that.
And Matthew Broderick is kind of brought in between them, and he has to like break the curse, as far as I remember. It's been a while since I saw it, but yes, Stephen is referencing the fact that Rutger Hauer passed away, like tears in the rain this week.
Yeah,
very
RIP.
sad to hear about Mr. Rutger Hauer. I gotta admit though, as far as Rutger Hauer goes, I guess obviously Blade Runner is the one that
That's my big reference, but you see him in a ton of
Oh,
stuff.
I mean, like during the late 80s, he was in everything. Again, Blade Runner is really the one that I kind of knew a lot about. Nighthawks, yeah, Lady Hawk. He made a late career resurgence in Christopher Nolan movies. He was in The Dark Knight. Oh, yeah, I think it was in Batman Begins. So I'm not sure I'm like the person to really talk about Rutger Hauer, but it is very obviously such an iconic performance in that particular role in Blade Runner, and famously that Everything Fades Away Like Tears in the Rain was a improvised speech, which is what he's kind of famous for. So R.I.P. Rutger Hauer. Lady Hawk, I don't know if we're gonna get to do it. I don't
mean,
know.
we might not do it on the show, but I'll watch it.
I honestly, I think you would dig it.
Yeah.
I think you would totally. I mean, did you like Willow, Krull,
Sure.
Conan the
Yeah,
Barbarian?
yeah.
That kind of period of like. I think you would totally dig Lady Hawk. Michelle Pfeiffer in a kind of great young performance as well.
And pardon me, but I keep thinking of the Patty Klein song, Lady Bump.
Lady Bump, yeah.
Thane, our good friend Thane at MTV, showed us on the EMAs years ago.
The-
If you haven't heard that song, look it up.
All right. And also, there's a great New Zealand artist by the name of Lady Hawk, which you should check out as well. One more email coming in from Jacob, whose podcast we were on a couple of weeks ago, the Movie Emotion podcast, MOVI Emotion, where I believe we were talking about Midsummer and camping and being friends and going to New Zealand. I don't know. There was a lot of
stuff.
There was a lot of mushrooms being taken during that episode.
What?
Jacob writes in about our I Am Mother review. I was a bit surprised to hear both of you gushing about the film. I definitely agree that it has interesting philosophical ideas that were expressed, but I don't think they were explored all that actively. I thought the two films that you guys mentioned during your discussion, Moon and 10 Cloverfield Lane, were particularly apt for understanding more about than I Am Mother. Look, I'm not going to disagree that... I'm not going to disagree that Moon.
Wait, could you repeat? Thank you. I didn't hear
I feel like I'm a Futurama character today. I'm not going to disagree that Moon and 10 Cloverfield Lanes are excellent films with interesting philosophical ideas that it does play with. But I also think I Am Mother is as well. And we had this sort of interesting conversation about movie perfections. And I really think I Am Mother is a tight, perfect little movie. It reminded you, the other movie that I don't think I mentioned during that episode was Ex Machina. I kind of felt it fell into the sort of same category of like a chamber piece about artificial intelligence and humanity and all that sort of jazz. I'm going to hold steadfast to my opinion of that movie, which is I think it's excellent. And I think a severely underseen film that everyone should go and see.
Yeah, Jacob, you can't shake us with pleasant and wonderful guest spots on your podcast and being super nice and cool. We're going to stand our ground.
Yeah.
You can't change our... No, I mean, look, I sort of stand still with my opinions from the review as well. I loved it. The only thing I always try to find, if someone like really is animately disagreeing with something that I'm thinking, other than Shahir, I try to really sort of figure out the why, and like maybe there's something that I missed. And here's
You don't do that for me?
not professionally.
You don't listen to anything I say?
No. I listen. I just don't try.
You just ignore.
We've done like 200 and something of these. You must have gotten that by now. No, Jacob, the one thing I can think of, honestly, maybe, is the fact that, to be honest, when I watched it, I did have pretty low expectations for when it comes to like independent-y sci-fi Netflix films. Not that this is an independent film, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't expecting much, and then when it did blow me away, I mean, maybe that raised it higher for me, but I do think even in a void, where, in the impossible void where expectation did not exist, I would still be singing that movie's praises. So, but yeah.
Jacob actually wrote us a slightly longer email, which I won't read, but it basically, because it goes into a little bit of a spoiler spoiler territory, but it was a really well thought out email about why he had some sort of qualms about I Am Mother. But here's what I will say: if you're a listener and you haven't seen I Am Mother, please go and watch it out on Netflix, which we presume you already have. It's very easy to access, and I think it's really worth your time. If you disagree, please email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod to tell us why we're absolutely 100% correct or incorrect about I Am Mother.
But now we're going to say farewell to emails.
Ooh, I like what you did there.
And hello to the farewell.
I don't know what you did there.
Yeah, man. I had seen the trailer. I forget in front of which film for this, and it instantly got me interested.
Of course, it's a beautiful trailer. I watched the trailer after the movie, and I was like, this trailer is catnip for me.
Yeah.
This is exactly the kind of movie I will pay money to go see based on the trailer. I didn't go see I didn't watch the trailer because I just heard great things about it at Sundance. And we both actually I'm not certain. I mentioned before that I think I'd worked with Awkwafina. I think I've edited work by Awkwafina.
I see.
I can't recall if I have met her, it would be a very long time ago, and it would be very brief.
I mean, I worked with her.
But you know her, right?
I mean, yes and no.
Right.
I mean, who knows if I mean, of course she remembers me. We worked together on Girl Code. Mm-hmm. And Guy Code versus Girl Code,
which is what I would have worked on at the same time, but I don't think I.
But I was producing her on sets a couple times, and she's always been a delight. I'm so ecstatic to see her career go. I've talked about this in Ocean's 8, and I believe Crazy Rich Asians. And
also joining the MCU.
Yeah, and also joining the MCU, which is very, very cool. A lot of that news, which we can get into later.
Pretty much everyone is joining the MCU at this point,
yeah,
right?
Like everyone, get in here. I will say this, and I forget if I've told this anecdote before, but two friends of mine, one of which who's been on the show, Chelsea White, and also Court Dunn, who is a film director himself. Court directed the first 4, I believe, of Awkwafina's music videos, and Chelsea was a producer on Girl Code as well. And not once, but twice, I would get texts from, because I guess I didn't know that Awkwafina knew both of them.
Okay.
And so I would get texts from each of them saying that they were hanging out with Awkwafina and that I should come out. I got this twice, and I got weirded out because I didn't know Court and Chelsea knew each other, and I had no idea what was going on. But on 2 separate occasions at 3 o'clock in the morning, I get texts of Court, Awkwafina, and Chelsea like in some friggin' bar in Brooklyn at 3 a.m. looking like they're having a blast. I'd be like, "Come out," and I'm like, "I'm tired."
That's exactly my response anytime anyone asks me to come out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
So Awkwafina, if you're listening to this, I'm terribly sorry that
you
I
missed
never,
out, bud.
I mean, I feel like I do that quite a bit. I've slowly become a homebody, and that's no good for anyone.
That's my life.
But I'm very needless to say, I'm really psyched that her career has gone in the direction it has, because she is a fucking hard worker and she's good at her craft. And and this movie, in a weird way, I mean, I'm glad about all the comedic success that she's had. Of course, the films in SNL, and being the second Asian American or Asian woman to be the host of Saturday Night Live. This film, I feel like, is like, for me, the pinnacle of all work that I've seen her in.
Okay.
I think she did such a fucking good job.
Okay.
Because I knew she had comedy chops. That was never a question. And I never, her comedy chops were so good, I never stopped to think about
her
if she, what her dramatic range would be.
Right. I remember. I think it might be Judd Apatow who might have said this, or somebody else. Every comedy director. No, you know who it was? The creator of Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan. He said comedians always have the talent to become dramatic actors. Dramatic actors may or may not have the skill level to become a comedian. He says it never works. He says he's never seen it go that way. He's always seen comedians are always able to step into dramatic acting.
I think the only exception to that rule about drama going to comedy would be Tom Cruise, because Les Grossman was fucking funny.
Yeah, I think his point is that it's possible, but he said,
unless you're Tom Cruise.
Yeah, it's possible, but comedians can always do dramatic parts.
Yeah, I mean that's possible.
Yeah, that's possible. But stepping aside from the Aquafina factor for a second, this film is about a grandmother who has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and whose family decides not to inform her of that decision, which apparently is a common approach in mainland China.
And I had no idea about that.
I'm curious though. And a part of the marketing that A24 did with this film was to get people to text in about their their nainais, and in Indian culture, it's their nannies or their daddies. I'm curious, Matt, your grandmother. Do you want to tell? Should we share some grandma stories, some Grammy stories? Are you close with your grandmas?
Yeah,
know them?
so
Nice stories,
so
not nice
I
stories.
probably
You're hesitating in a way that makes me uncomfortable that I asked the question.
Yeah, sorry. I should have actually prefaced this before we went on the air. So I am close with my grandmother. On my mother's side, my father's side died when I was very young, but I was close with her before. But I was like 8 or 9.
Okay.
My Nana is what I call her.
Yeah.
Catherine or Kay.
Yeah.
She is a wonderful woman who is, I believe, 92 years old.
Wow.
Sadly, however, literally 3 days before I saw this film, she was admitted to hospice.
I'm really sorry.
No. And I should have thought of it before we even, because I was thinking about it literally since I've seen the movie.
Yeah.
So there, it brings up interesting putting aside my emotional burden I've just laid at your feet, it has gotten me a comfort from this film that it's given me is from an intellectual perspective, giving me the idea of like what I think is better. Like, if someone is terminal, letting them know, or letting them sort of continue on.
I was just meaning like what are the pleasant memories you have of your Grammy, like your nana.
Oh, I mean, there's a ton. I mean, so they used to live on a farm in St. Johnsville, New York, which is a beautiful tiny postcard of post-it note town, farming town in New York. And yeah, I mean. When I was younger, I would hang out with her almost exclusively while I was there. My grandfather's very cool, but he's an older school, very how do I put it? Like almost like a combination. Like I won't say warrior poet. If there's not warrior, but like the hard ass farmer poet, which I don't really relate to that much.
I'm trying to imagine like Jack Kerouac ripped in a sort of Matthew Kroll type figure.
But Nana was always the one that was down for like a ton of fun and down for whatever dumb stupid idea I had. I used to make like haunted houses in the barn or shoot movies in the barn. Yeah. And they would help me, and we'd go get props, and we'd do all that stuff. So she was very formulative in my honestly my my moving forward towards filmmaking, eventually television, eventually now YouTube and this and all that jazz. It had helped me tremendously, both in that aspect of just doing that when I was young, but also in a really sweet way of what's the word I'm looking for? Just being incredibly supportive when I was not the easiest child to relate to.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I have a similar story about my nani, which is my grandmother on my mother's side, which is that my daddy, which is my so in Hindi you call your paternal grandmother your daddy, and your dada, which is the father, and then your maternal grandmother is your nani and your nana. And my nani came to stay with us when I was like quite young, but also in that really dickish stage of like, just about going through puberty, really annoying, not far removed from what I am now, but I'm just saying, you're
a lot taller.
The early stages of that phase. And the tricky thing was that I was the youngest kid, and she had to stay in my room. For like a month. Oh,
you got ousted.
Yeah, a month and a half, or I think it was a month or maybe something like that. And I just remember being a real shit, being a real dick. And she was super cool and like really nice and like, looked after me while mom and dad would go out and that kind of thing. And, it was just cool. She had all the quality. She's passed away. Both my, I think all my grandparents have passed away. Yeah. She was just really. She had the sort of gentleness and the sort of air of happiness that, you know, like she would smile. I the thing I remember about her the most is the smile, you know, like she would light up the room kind of thing, you know, and she was just really lovely. And the thing I was thinking about now is, now that I'm a parent, is seeing my mother and my mother-in-law turn into grandparents. And that's been really delightful to watch, because they're basically, you know, they what you realize is they get to relive that period of their life where they were looking after a child, but they do it without the pressure,
without the constant pressure.
Yeah, without the constant. They can hand it back, you know, hand them back at any moment. And so I've just been thinking about, you know, the fact that my mother and my mother-in-law have now transitioned into grandparents, and just seeing like how much my son loves them and how much like they're willing to do anything for him. And, you know, like it's all about food and like playtime and laughing and joking and giggling, and, you know, and he's completely at ease. And like, I think I one thing I will say, which I think happened with my mother, is that my son was so responsive to my mother in terms of learning how to speak. Like, she would just talk to him all the time.
Sure.
And he just he would talk to her like constantly. You know, he said his first word before he was 1, and it was flower, because he was talking to her. So he didn't say mama or dada. He said flower because of something she was saying to him. So I just think, you know, grandmothers have that quality, which is that they are your number one. They're the most love you will get in life is from a grandparent.
I mean,
from a grandmother.
If everything's working out the way it should, I agree.
Yeah, of course, you know, it doesn't work out all the time, but you know, of course. And I think, you know, this film is you know, like among many things, is a tribute to the fact that your grandparent, and particularly in this case your grandmother, is just this like figure in your life that is always there for you, that always cares about you, that always wants to know what you're doing, that always is willing to like drop everything and like, you know, cook for you, do your laundry, do whatever it needs. It's all that like goofy stuff. No matter how much of a shit you get to be, as I was, your grandma's always there for you. And I think that was like this really touching moment in this film, was like realizing that this was sort of, on one level, just a kind of love letter to those people that raise our lives that aren't our parents.
Sure. Another aspect of this movie, and this is the most minor of spoilers. This is nothing that anyone would. This is a statement about grand people in general. Is something I really liked about it was about maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of the movie, and it's when the grandmother is talking to some of her old friends.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the war and how she took a bullet and like all of this stuff.
She had a whole life.
Like, but that's the craziest part. I know it's a dumb thing to say, but that's the craziest part for me about grandparents in general, because when you're growing up, you kind of lock yourself in like, oh, Nana and Baba, they're like this. They live on a farm.
You can't imagine them being your age.
Even when you get to the point when you can see that your parents are human beings.
Yeah.
There's something ethereal about how your grandparents function. And I remember when I was finally like, you know, mid-20s and not a dick. No, I wasn't a dick. I was, you know, selfish. I was young.
You heard me like did silence on the side. Crickets, not a dick. When
did that happen? Well, I eventually became. But I remember like sitting down with my grandparents and like talking about their life.
Yeah.
And like, it's fascinating shit. Like, my grandfather worked on the Star Wars satellite missile defense system back when computers had punch cards and literal moths would get in the tubes.
Right.
My grandmother was a nurse through I think in like 6 cities, like all over the place, because they moved around a ton, and she'd follow my grandfather, and then she'd like basically would rise through the ranks at hospitals and like lead wards, and then they'd have to move and she'd have to start again.
Yeah.
And she was always very helpful in like helping with people, but like just the idea that like, yeah, they were my age at one point, and you're like, that's like, it's the simplest concept to grasp, but I feel like it's something that, because we don't think about it a lot, it gets lost. And I loved that there was even just a small moment in this film that was like, oh yeah, not only is Billy Aquafina's character and the family going through all of this stuff, this debate, But this is a woman who's lived a life.
Yeah, I know. She was like a resistance fighter at some point, or
Yeah.
a revolutionary fighter at some point.
So that
Took
was
a
really nice
bullet.
to see.
Yeah, and obviously in Eastern culture, the relationship between the grandparents is slightly different. In that, essentially it's not the we talked about this previously, but it's not the expectation, but there's a sort of an inbuilt kind of inherent way in which the order of life goes, which is that you will look, children will look after their parents at some point, and usually in like an Indian household in particular, you might, the grandparents might live in the household, and it's not uncommon and it's not weird. It's just kind of part of the fabric of life. And I think, okay, so stepping aside from the grandma factor at this point, I think there was an interesting thing about watching this film, which is that ultimately I did, as I was watching it. It is a very quiet film. It's a very quiet and sort of slyly observational film where not a lot actually happens in terms of like surface level plot mechanics, and in terms of also like turns that happen beyond the initial choice that needs to be made about whether we should tell or not tell, tell our grandparent about with this illness, and it's basically takes the podcast story, which was again, you can go back to This American Life 2016 to find that episode, and just expands it out kind of neatly and gently. And at first, I thought that was somewhat of a sense of hesitation about exploring the story to a further extent, basically like not taking the story to the next stage, so to speak. But there's a final moment in this film where you realize why that was the case, and I don't want to say what that is until we get into spoilers.
Yeah.
I think the thing that was really slyly, at least for me, woven into the story that wasn't quite apparent in the original podcast, and was the thing that Lulu Wang was kind of like touching on, was the difficulty with which children who are either first generation or second generation in a foreign country relate to their country of origin, and that played such an enormous part of this film, because in the film you see Billy kind of like going back to her hometown that she ultimately feels that she was deprived of in some way in her youth.
I believe it's Changchun, China.
Yeah, in China. And she feels that she was kind of deprived of that. And I was listening to an interview with Awkwafina and Rami from HBO's the A24 show Rami, and they were talking about the fact that Awkwafina is herself an only child, and that sense that when she was taken away, although she's a first generation here, but in the film the character seems to be an only child as well. She has no siblings, and she talks about how like she missed out on the opportunity to be around family by being taken away from her grandmother and taken away from China, and also like not seeing that her grandfather had passed away. She didn't really know or understand why that was in this film. And I thought that was a really slyly beautiful little observation, and it's done with such a sort of a confidence of storytelling where she doesn't need to extrapolate it out into big dramatic scenes. She doesn't need to make this a sort of like have any big climax to the film where choices are being made or people are yelling at each other. It's just kind of like slyly observed. And I will say I felt while I was watching it that it was slight, but I was also feeling myself well up whenever the moments in the film were clearly just gently tugging at that idea that your grandmother is this person whom you love deeply and dearly, and how you do want to do the best by them, but you're conflicted about whether they will, whether that is the right thing, and more importantly, where is your place in the world, and how deeply affecting it can be to think about where your place in the world is. I'm a first generation American now, and I kind of think about like all these places I come from and what's my relationship to those places and how do I feel about them now that I'm no longer there.
Yeah.
And I think that was such a key, beautifully observed moment, like beautifully observed undercurrent to this film. That's again, it's not played for big moments.
I would definitely call it an undercurrent.
Yeah, and I think that was what I kind of walked away from. That I was sort of quite surprised with how confidently that was played, because it's not. She doesn't feel the need to kind of make it a big moment or make that feel like a big moment, and I think it really works for me in that respect.
Well, I think that what this film does is what I think all really strong films strive to do, or should, and that is and this sounds weird. I don't mean it to be derogatory at all, but like, pick a lane, stay in it, and know what you're doing. Like, this movie knows that it's not going to be, fast-paced or like high, like explosive drama that sets it up to be like this real-world thing where the entirety of the tension that is being built is, for me anyway, was whether or not Billy would be able to keep her mouth shut about this because she loves her grandmother so much and is conflicted on whether or not this is the right thing to do. And the moments are not large until maybe the end at the wedding, if you consider that sort of like, because that's kind of as big as this movie gets.
Yeah.
And this movie, maybe I'm going to reword what I said because I think it sounds a little bad. This movie knew exactly what it was. And it knew exactly what emotional through lines of almost, I would say, all people's lives it wanted them to relate with. And it was able to craft those moments in incredibly effective ways. I think, side note, we haven't done it yet. I should read the IMDb thing just so we're clear on what's going on. A Chinese family discovers their grandmother has only a short while left to live and decide to keep her in the dark, scheduling a wedding to gather before she dies. So that's one of the general conceits of this entire film. Is they're not telling her, but the family wants to see her, so they fake a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
One of the, I guess, Billy's cousin in this film, so is basically being forced to marry a girl from Japan because they live in Japan now, that side of the family.
Yeah,
and they have to literally do it. And the grandmother's like helping with the wedding.
Yeah. It gives us something to do. And that's that thing that the idea is that if you weigh down someone with the idea that you're going to die, their mindset becomes about death. Whereas if you ignore it, their mindset is about life. And I think I don't know if it always works that way, but I think it's a beautiful kind of sentiment.
It always depends on how functional you are when you find out what is wrong, right? Like
if you have leprosy and someone tells you you're fine, that might not work out.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, cancer is a fucking hell of a disease. And it affects, there's so many different kinds and it affects everybody differently. My mother's a cancer survivor. There are times like in this film where like people can have it still be functional even though they're terminal.
Right.
And I found myself more on the Eastern side of the philosophy in this particular situation while watching the film. I think I always go back to the idea of why if you've done something wrong, why do you then tell the person that you did something wrong? And depending on what the situation is, like say if you've wronged somebody,
right?
But the truth will hurt that person even more than what you did.
Yeah.
The philosophical, what's the best moral thing you can do? Do you hold that in so you're carrying the guilt,
right?
And the other person moves on with their life, as if nothing had happened. So you're sort of carrying the burden for the thing you did wrong.
Yeah.
Or when you tell somebody, you are being honest and telling someone the truth, but in a way you are alleviating yourself of guilt.
Right.
And I always find that conundrum very interesting. And this has took it to a whole sort of side level where in this case, I agree with the family. And I liked watching Billy's character come to terms and never sort of like be fully okay with it. But again, it also highlighted kind of exactly what you just said about the undercurrent of sort of like the place where your family is from and the country that you currently reside in. She was always kind of two minds of it. And she never she argued with it in a way a child argues with their parents when she was arguing with her parents.
Yeah.
But it never felt like she 100% thought it was the right thing to do to tell the grandmother.
Yeah, it's essentially, it's that ethical question of lying to someone.
Yeah.
But like the question here is that in the the doctor says to her in the office that it's a good lie. It's not a bad lie. It's a lie that kind of helps. And I think the interesting thing there is the film gets into is the relationship that, the conversation she has with her uncle. And her uncle says something like, in the West, you believe one's life belongs to oneself.
Yeah.
And in the East, your life belongs to everybody. and
Your family, yeah.
your family. And I think, and that means you're all together in this no matter what. And I think, there's no, like I'm a child of Eastern origins raised in the Western world. So I have this sort of conflict in my family, which is that I tend to believe that, like individualism is more, paramounts anything to do with the family's needs. And that has often brought me in conflict with my family, severe conflict in some cases, and I think this film kind of pointed that the thing that Billy's character is kind of dealing with is the sort of intrinsic question mark that's around that, which is that there is no one right or wrong answer, and she's not fighting against, she's not going to try and drag her family into the sort of Western ideal of medical care. There's a presumption that, ultimately there's nothing they can do about this diagnosis. All they can do is decide how to respond to it. And I think that's a fascinating question.
And in this film, I never was thinking, is she going to decide to tell her grandmother?
Right.
I was always thinking, because she agreed to go along with her family, can she emotionally handle and fake her way through this? Because her entire family in this movie was like, she's going to figure it out because you're a horrible liar.
Right, yeah. Now, and I will say, my initial reading as I was walking out of the theater was the sense that, like, Billy Awkwafina's performance in this was kind of one note in that she's constantly teetering on the edge of breaking down in front of her family. Like, that's the note that she's playing the whole way through the film. But I think the thing that I walked away from when I thought about it more is it's not about breaking down within the family. It's coming to terms with the sense of intergenerational differences between her and her family. The fact that she was raised in the West and her family kind of came to America to kind of raise her. Like she has that really interesting conversation with the bellhop who's carrying her bags up the stairs. Like which do you prefer, America or China? It's just different, and she's wrestling with that idea that it's just different. And how do I come to terms with this idea that because I think part of her misses the life that she could have had if she was surrounded by family and if she grew up in China.
Sure.
And I think that's what ultimately the interesting thing is that what she's wrestling with isn't necessarily just the notion that, like she has to lie to her grandmother. It's that her grandmother is the last vestige of the link that she has to China.
Yeah.
And so it's not just that her grandmother is dying. It's that when that person dies, that's the last, full-blooded expression of love that she has for China. She's not as close with her uncle who's moved to Japan. She has an aunt who I believe lives in China, but she's somewhat
help the grandmother.
Yeah, helps the grandmother out. So I think that's an interesting. I think the film smartly kind of just subtly wrestles with that idea in really beautiful ways.
I want to bring up a sort of side thing about filmcraft that I'm hoping you can help me figure out why something is the case with this film for me.
I'll give it my best shot. Putting on my hat right now.
Yes. So this is the first film that is predominantly in a different language that I've watched in a very long time, and in memory.
Okay.
Where I completely forgot that it was in a different language.
Okay.
Like, I'm always acutely aware of subtitles in my brain. I just, because I'm reading it and it's a different part of actively engaging with the story, etc. And this time, I had to go back while I was doing just sort of my notes for this episode. I was like, I was watching some interview and they're like, oh, well, 60 or 70% of it is spoken in Chinese. And I was like, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
I know.
Yeah.
But and I was like, what? And then I'm like, oh, I guess. But a lot of really pertinent all of the lines in it, I know they logically I know in my brain that they spoke Chinese.
Right.
I don't like the emotional resonance or whatever of it, and it just reads to me like it wasn't. And I'm wondering if that is because a strength of performance of Lulu Wang's direction of the I can't pinpoint, and maybe it's not one thing, but I'm normally very aware, and this time I had blinders to the fact that I had just read of a film.
I don't know. I couldn't pinpoint one single thing that I think the film that this film does in particular to kind of give you that sense of not recognizing or not
remembering
feeling the subtitle or feeling that you're reading a film. I think my thing is that I feel like you should never be scared of subtitles.
Oh, no, 100% not.
But, and for the exact reason that you're saying, which is that a lot of people are scared of subtitle films, and we don't get a lot of subtitle films in the movie theaters because of the very fact that, like marketers, immediately determine that films that are subtitles are difficult to program. People don't like reading things. People want, yada, yada, yada. But my experience of always watching subtitle films has always been that within the first couple of minutes, I forget that I'm reading a film. Now, I think one thing, I'm a fairly fast reader, so I think that helps a little bit. And if you're not a fast reader, that can hinder it. And one thing that this film maybe does is that the dialogue is sparse and kind of spaced out, so you kind of get time to kind of live in it. It's also a beautifully shot film where the film is the best way I could describe it, it has these it has this observational quality to it, and I think the most beautiful examples that I can think of, just coming off the top of my head, were the images of the bird. Like the bird that would kind of turn up in the house and that she would have to flutter away. And then eventually the bird turns into an image of her grandfather, and he's smoking at the window. And then we turn to her and she looks back and we just see this sort of puff of smoke floating out of the window. And it has this beautiful observational quality, sit back at a distance. It's really great filmmaking, to be honest with you. It's very it's very confident. That's the way I would describe it. I feel like when I direct something, I'm an anxious director, which is that I always feel like I got to capture this part of the information and then this insert shot and this insert shot. And then when you look at my edits, it's always I'm trying to point you exactly where you need to go.
Right.
And this film lives and breathes in nicely paced, well executed wide frames.
Because
that lets you sit and breathe in the world and has that observational quality. And it's something I always personally just admire in filmmaking, and I wish I could do.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's just interesting because both Burning and Long Day's Journey into Night were the last two subtitled films I watched, and I was always and it didn't take away at all from it, but I was always acutely aware that it was subtitled.
The secondary thing is that the performances are warm and loving and gentle.
And
they're really easily readable. Just the grandmother is so well cast.
Here's what it is. It's obviously the craft of the director and the actors and etc. And the cinematographer. But I think it is because it's the most realistic, relatable. On another level, I'm watching it and realizing, this is life. This is something that I could live. Whereas, granted, things like Burning and Long Day's Journey into Night, are possible, but not as easily. You can't shed your disbelief that easily. You're watching something slightly fantastical in a way. So this is true slice of life where I bought entirely. And I think it comes from the personal experience of all the actors and the director as well. Lulu Wang, this is about her grandmother, obviously.
Yeah.
Awkwafina was raised by her grandmother, whom she's very close with. There's been in some of her music videos.
Also, Lulu Wang's grandmother, great aunt, plays the great aunt in
Really?
this film. So that's actually her great aunt who had to tell the grandmother, decided to not tell the grandmother. So it's actually her.
Well, so now let's get into spoilers because we're sort of getting there. So that's what's happening here. Fun story about this film is, even though this is a story that happened a little bit ago, that Lulu Wang has told in podcast form and now in a major motion picture, Nene's still alive.
Nene's still alive in this film, and I can't think of a single moment, a post-credit scene like that, which generated so much joy in the audience. My audience was just so ecstatic that she was still there.
So when they went to shoot this in the actual hometown, in her actual grandmother's actual hometown, they first weren't going to.
Yeah.
And then her grandmother, who is still alive, and this entire story is about her having a terminal illness, was like, well, if you're going to shoot in China, you should shoot here. She doesn't know what the movie's about.
Yeah.
The woman we are talking about still doesn't know she is technically has terminal cancer. And
I'm curious about that.
And she doesn't. I just read a thing. So this is how they played it, from what I understand.
So the actual making of the film was perpetrating the lie even further.
Exactly. So the crew, while they were even scouting, would go up to the grandmother's apartment and like use the restroom if they had to. They thought about maybe shooting actually in the apartment, but they're like, that's a little too much. So like the entire crew now is in on this lie. And she still doesn't know. And she went and visited and hung out with her grandmother and acclimated herself to the city and like all that jazz. And I'm reading this, I'm like, making a film is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But having to lie to your grandmother,
Who is the subject
of your film, adds another level of nightmare producer complexity. That is absolutely fascinating.
Just make sure that all your crew, no one in your crew can speak Chinese.
I think the majority of the crew,
so that they couldn't
and
let
the
it slip,
cast.
You know,
I know, but that was a big thing. It was a lot of them were Chinese.
Yeah. And no, I think that's extraordinary. And you know, the thing that I was talking about earlier, which was that the film never kind of like dips into histrionics or like gets into like a big culmination of events where people are arguing with each other or trying to like pull apart at this lie. When I watched it, it had that sort of sense of one-noteness where we were kind of just playing the same note over and over and over again. But when we got to the end, we realized that she's still alive. And that, you know, like, because then I thought about it, I was like, there's no way you could dramatize this movie, because ultimately when you say this is a film about the farewell of, you know, saying this of meeting your grandmother and like telling her this lie, in my writing brain, the third act is about the death of the grandmother, right? Like it has to be. If you're pitching this film,
in a classic 3-act structure.
The first act is about the lie. The second act is about doing the lie.
They handle it.
Yeah, and then the third act is about the death of the grandmother and what that actually means, right? I mean, that's kind of what I think. But that's not what's happened in real life, and so to dramatize it would be the wrong thing to do. And then so when at the end of the film, when we realized with that title card that she's still alive, you know, I was kind of like, I get it. I see why you did what you did, and I think it's a lovely thing that you've created here in memory of, or not even memory, in teasing out that idea of like the difference between East and West. And in this case, it actually meant something because she's still alive. She doesn't have cancer.
And also,
she has cancer.
Yeah. I do want to say too, though, I don't want to just make it so that this actual, like, after the movie ends, sort of extra scene of the actual grandmother is lovely. And you're 100% right. It had a great emotional response in the theater. I think the film entirely works the way it is without that.
Yeah,
scene.
I think it could. Yeah.
I think I was feel like, because say that didn't exist,
right?
And say, you know, the end of the film. God, it's such a cool thing. Billy goes back to America, and there's a moment in the film when
I loved this
when they were in China, and the grandmother was doing, I guess, some
form of tai chi,
but it's just a lot of ha, ha, and
yeah.
like it was very fun, like in the beginning when they're doing it together outside in the courtyard of the apartment building in China, and then Awkwafina is walking down the street in Brooklyn or Queens, and she just does it in the street the same way her grandmother does, and then it cut to a tree in the yard and all the birds flying out in China. And I'm literally like, I'm getting misty, like recounting that scene to you,
because it's such it's a beautiful visual encapsulation of the idea of connecting the East to the West. You know, her life from the East connects to her life in the West, and I just, you know, like, because the grandmother explains it as like, you should do this because it restores your vitality and it's you pushing yourself out in the world kind of thing. And then she does it, and it, like, we see the repercussion, you know, like
the butterfly effect.
Yeah, the butterfly effect, you know, like a butterfly flaps its wing in Brazil and it rains in Tokyo, something like that.
Not the Ashton Kutcher film.
Yeah, not the butterfly effect, but the Jurassic Park explanation. I think that's this is a beautiful encapsulation of the idea that this film has been playing around with, which is it's not just about this lie. It's about the relationship that Billy's character has to her homeland. And, you know, like, not to extrapolate it out even further or anything like that beyond the parameters of the film, but it did play in my mind in terms of like, how does film reflect upon life? We're sitting here in the week of, you know, a presidential tweet which told 4 American citizens to go back to where they came from, and I thought a lot about that tweet as I was watching this movie, because this movie is kind of playing with the complex relationship that people, you know, first generation, you know, Americans have with their homelands. And you know, it's sort of. Again, I don't want to turn into a politics discussion, but like I have been told many times, to go back to where I came from in many different countries, both New Zealand and America, and I'm always kind of, whenever anyone says that, it's inevitably driven by racism, so there's no question mark about that, despite what you might be reading, hearing in the main CNN or whatever, everyone's debating about whether this was racist or not.
I couldn't stand that, by the way. I got into some arguments with people about that, because I was getting upset that news organizations weren't calling it racist.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're a news organization. That's the definition of racism.
Here's my the
Fox
one,
News.
Anytime a pundit comes out and says, "Oh, it's not racist," first thing you should ask them is, "Would you say that to me?" And inevitably, they never would. Just the first thing you should say is like, "Okay, would you tell me to go back to where I came from?" And no one would ever say that. And the other question I asked them was like, would you let your child get away with saying that to a person from who was not born in America?
Yeah.
You never would.
Yeah.
And yet, anyway, regardless. Yeah. But I think the interesting thing that this film kind of brought up for me in respect to that conversation is the complex relationship we have with our homelands, which is that we all come from some other place, and that other place represents kind of the ground rooting of who we're made up of. And it's not a case of like you can just go back to where you came from. Again, the people who say that are inevitably racist. But we should embrace the idea that we come from so many different places, and it's beautiful that we come from so many different places, and it's beautiful that Billy's character has had this opportunity to reconnect with her Eastern, with like where her grandmother comes from,
yeah.
And that's the sort of the summation of emotions that I think this film kind of plays with in a really lovely way, and the only way that kind of nuanced idea can come out is coming from a lived experience, which is what Lulu Wang has by writing this film. It's about her experience, and that's not something that I think you could potentially tease out as easily if you were just writing this film about this sort of great lie. So I think that it's unfortunately timely because of recent events.
I mean, sure, yeah.
Yeah, but it happens to kind of touch upon in a really beautiful way without intending to this sort of current sentiment we have in this country about immigration, yada yada yada. It's not, the film is obviously not directly commenting on politics.
No,
I'm
but
just saying,
with the current climate that we live in, you have to you sort of like see something that is the showing a positive aspect of people's differences, being this film,
yeah.
And culture's differences, and then you have whatever we've devolved into over here.
There's another episode of I believe it was either Radiolab or This American Life, but it was a beautiful story. It has brought me to tears many a time. I can't remember the episode it was in, but it was about a father who realizes that their child is autistic or has Asperger's syndrome, and makes the conscious decision to take their child out of public schooling. This happened in America, in the Bronx, and to take their child out of public school and to homeschool their child, and does it because they never want their child to have the label of autism or Asperger's, and the child thrives. The child goes on to university, college, because the child never has that label put upon them, and never kind of self-doubts themselves or feels like they're different from other kids or anything like that. And it's this wonderful sort of testament to the power to do what's necessary for the people we love. And I think, in the case of, it's a similar sort of situation here where it's like realizing that potentially the loving thing to do is to allow someone to have joy rather than the sort of weight of the expectation of death. And I think, I don't know. I don't know if, there's no one size fits all kind of scenario, and I'm not advocating that if someone has a serious illness for you to like lie about it, but the film sort of touched on the possibility that there's more to one approach.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was a beautiful one.
Agreed. Real quick, I do want to sort of, we've been talking a lot about Awkwafina. I do want to bring up some standouts in the film. I'm going to butcher some names.
Yeah.
First of all, the guy who plays the father, Tsai Ma,
who's been a television character actor for a long period of time.
Phenomenal. I've seen him in a bunch of stuff. I just like when I saw him come up, I was like, oh, I know, like this. He'll kill this. Also, the mother, Diana Lynn.
Playing. I mean, like the sort of English language barrier to certain, to Asian performers. I think this film doesn't shy away from just the way she speaks, and,
Yeah,
and I think
I thought it was
like,
awesome.
she finds a poetry within it.
And Shusen Zhao, the Nene.
No, yeah.
It's just
She's delightful, right?
I'm actually gonna sort of. She doesn't even have an IMDb picture.
Is this the only film she's been in?
I don't know.
No,
it
I mean,
might be. Her page is pretty blank.
Yeah, it's the only film she's been in. And I just want to go to her house and eat meat pies.
I mean, she has such a warmth to her and an easy sort of conversational tone and making you feel at ease and whatnot. And
I loved when she was like, I love to pat your cute little butt.
Sure.
I was just it's that thing that you do when the kid is 3 and then she just keeps doing that.
But when Jian's the character Jian, Diana Lin she has the most complex. She married into this family,
right?
In the film,
yeah.
She has the most complex relationship, I'd say, with Nene because she doesn't think that she ever liked her. She goes into this little bit of thing, and it's funny because she brings up stuff that is also true to family things. Nene didn't like coming to the States because then she's not in her element and not in control and can't be. But when here, she holds court, and there's nothing wrong with that intrinsically, especially if you're a really good person.
Yeah.
Although I will say, you could explore that side of things too. And when you get people out of their comfort zone, or let me rephrase: if people always refuse to say come to you rather than you go to them, that could be an issue. That's not explored here, but I liked seeing the other side.
Well, I think the way it comes to a head for Jian's character is that Haiyan's alcoholism is kind of her responsibility, and I think there's a slight undercurrent of Nene kind of blaming her for that. But then later on, it's weird because it's that thing that parents do with their own children, which is that you blame other people for their failings, but yet you're still kind of coddle them. She gives him alcohol.
Oh, the brothers haven't seen each other in 15 years. Let them drink. And it's no.
But then she kind of comments, slyly about oh, he's not looking very good. He's puffy. Is he drinking again? Kind of thing. It's that, I think it's that conflict with relationships that daughters have with their mother-in-laws.
I go back to just feeling and I guess this will sort of get into my final thoughts. Every character in this movie felt real.
Yeah. And they felt like they had an inner life outside of the film.
And everything felt like it had a level of depth and a complexity that real life has. And it makes you ask some hard questions. You watch some beautiful performances, great directing. The sound, the score is perfect. The songs are haunting in the right spots and lulling in the other right spots. And it makes you, again, going through the stuff, and I'm not going to get heavy before the end, but going through the stuff of dealing with, I guess the current dying of my Nana.
Right. Yeah.
It makes you sort of, I really appreciated the film because it made me think about the fact that there is no right way to die.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, when as a Westerner hearing this, you're like, what? At the beginning, and then you're like, no, this makes a lot of sense, and it was a really nice way to sort of see how the act of death, which we will all be given a big high five to at some point, will inevitably happen. And this is a bit of a side note. I was talking to my therapist, and we were talking about death and well, what's the best? What do we think, just for fun, what the best death is?
Being eaten by a bear like Brad Pitt. In that movie.
God, no, that's Leonardo DiCaprio.
No, there's a movie from back in the day. I forgot the title. Anthony Hopkins, Brad Pitt, and they always talk about what's a good death. And in the end, Anthony Hopkins gets mauled by a bear, and he says that was a good death.
I said my optimal death would be old, comfortable, and sudden.
Okay, old, comfortable, and sudden.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those were my adjectives.
Yeah. I don't know what my good death would be. I guess Legends of the Fall, by the way, was the film.
Okay.
It was a Edward Zwick film. What would my good death be? I guess as a parent, this is funny because we're filling out wills and stuff. Like I have responsibilities now. My good death would be feeling that I haven't left any loose ends for people behind.
Just grabbing someone's hand and being like, finish this script.
Yeah, finish. Complete it. Yeah, no, but like making sure that that I haven't left anyone in a bad situation by passing suddenly. So I think right now that's where my head is at. Is can I make sure that I've tied up any loose ends before I get hit by a bus? I don't know.
Of course.
Yeah, no. So I think this is a lovely, lovely film that explores a very small story. Just going back, there's one thing that really did confuse me in this film. One thing that actually stood out to me, and I didn't understand. I was like, did I miss a beat here?
No.
So I know I was about to jump into my final thoughts, but I just want to go back on this one part. At the wedding.
Sure.
At the wedding, they're kind of doing their speech. All the parents are doing their speeches,
Yep.
and then suddenly Awkwafina, Billy's character, runs out and says, "I've got to take care of something," and she runs to the hospital and gets the medical report.
Yeah.
Then goes back and gets it, photoshopped and changed and brought back and what have you. I didn't understand why that was happening at that moment.
Oh, because okay.
And I was like, did I miss
it? Yeah. So all of a sudden, one of Nene's helpers in the house that sort of is there with her.
Mr. Lee?
No, not Mr. Lee.
Oh, what the other maid? There's a maid at the beginning. Yeah.
Someone needs that maid to go get something for Nene, and they're looking for her very briefly. It's like a throwaway line or something, and then someone says, "Oh, where's Nene?" And then either the grandmother or the grandmother's sister, I don't remember which one, was like, "Oh, I sent her to get. She's going to get the results because they come out today."
Huh.
Nene asked her to go get the results. Someone said that Nene asked her to get. Someone who didn't know what was going on.
Okay,
and then that's when Awkwafina's like, "Fuck," runs out to go get. And that's why she catches her in the thing. So that is set up.
Okay, it was just it was the one thing where I was like,
it was very fast
because ultimately that's the scene that feels like the climax of the film, but it's really
and it ends in like a bodega Kinko's.
Yeah, and ultimately it's like it come. I felt like it came out of nowhere. I totally see that I could have missed that line. The feeling of the film being one note is actually taken away by the sense of what the film is actually trying to do.
Yeah.
With that sort of undercurrent of longing for the place you came from.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love the film. I think it's a lovely debut. I think it's a wonderful showcase. It's confidently made. It was, there was, the lights came up in our theater and there were so many people who were clearly thinking about their nays. They were thinking about their nays, and they were like, tears coming down. There were tears coming down my eyes, and again, my grandparents have passed away, but I just thinking about my mother and my mother-in-law and my father and my father-in-law who become grandparents and their relationship to my son, and I was just I was thinking about hope. What I wanted to do when I came out of this movie was make sure that relationship was cultivated in the same way that this relationship in this film was. Yeah. So please go out and see The Farewell. I think it's totally worth your time. Hopefully, by the time this episode drops, it is expanded out to more cities.
Agreed. And this has been the only podcast about the film The Farewell.
What should we do right now?
We should say goodbye.
We should do our...
What?
Farewells. Okay, never mind.
That was real. Oh God, Shahir, when you're not saying farewell to the flow of the episode, where can folks find you?
Oh, fuck that all up. I'm swimming upstream without a paddle. You people can find me at my website www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. Matt, when you are not picking up what I'm putting down, probably because I haven't put it down in the right place, where can people find you?
You can find me picking up Shahir's ripped oily shirts at MADGAGWKROL.com.
Buttery oily shirts.
Or Instagram, Skeletor 4 PREZ that's my Instagram, or PSN, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, go check out the good works we are doing at Extra Credits. We're just releasing a series on Magic the Gathering. We're working with Wizards of the Coast to teach people. We have the first episode where we're like, why it's important to to us growing up, both me and James Portnow, who's been on the show, and then that we're basically teaching you the basics and moving on to more advanced things of Magic the Gathering. So if you've ever been interested in learning Magic, it's a really fun way, and I teach you with my cat.
Learning real Magic? Because I would like to do some.
No, the card game Magic.
Like card tricks?
Okay, we're gonna go because Shahir's never been. Shahir's always had friends.
Barely.
But thank you so much.
Not a lot of friends come out to see my buttery nips.
Oh Jesus! Thank you for listening, despite the beginning of this episode and the end. And you'll hear us next week, and that will be that.
Good. I like
Farewell.
It. Farewell.
No.
Goodbye. Dolph Wiedesen something.
Dolph Wiedesen?
Dolph Wiedesen something.
Dolph Wiedesen, everybody.